The hours are long. Soviet officers told us that since they only have the conscripts for 2 years, they have to pack as much training in as possible. 19-year-old Alexei is showing off pictures of his wife and baby, but he may not get to see them during his time in uniform unless his performance is good enough to earn a 10-day leave. Not surprisingly, only 1 or 2 out of every 100 conscripts decides to stay in the Army.
No, I don't think of that.
Yes, of course I plan to leave and go back home.
The constant turnover means that every 6 months, the most experienced soldiers return to civilian life to be replaced by another batch of raw recruits. Another problem. The Soviet population is made up of dozens of different nationalities speaking different languages. According to U.S. estimates, as many as 1 out of every 4 Soviet soldiers does not speak Russian.
People are different from different levels of education, from different cultures. To make it go smoothly, you have to make a lot of effort to rally them as one unit.
Units like this chemical warfare detachment, which require a lot of classroom instruction, seem to have virtually no Asians or other minorities. Imagine looking at any American military unit and not seeing any black or Hispanic faces. The Soviets are well aware of the problems of a conscript army, but claim that when virtually every mother's son has to do his 2 years service, it creates a bond between the Army and the rest of society, which doesn't exist with professional armies. In the end, it will all come down to how well they can fight. David Martin, CBS News at the Narofominsk military base in the Soviet.
And by day's end, the Soviets had released enough information to satisfy the U.S. But at the same time, the White House put out a report which accuses the Soviets of new violations of the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. The report charges that the Kremlin moved 2 older defensive radar systems into positions near the cities of Moscow and
Afghanistan, where the Soviet-backed government suddenly is talking peace and U.S.-backed Muslim rebels are bringing the war downtown.
The look of reconciliation in Afghanistan. Government troops under attack by Mujahideen rebels in Kandahar province near the Pakistani border. The Kabul regime has just proclaimed a new constitution it says can end the war. It isn't working. The war reaches to the heart of Kabul. This firefight took place just a few hundred yards from where that new constitution was being adopted. 11 people died. Mikhail Gorbachev has called Afghanistan a bleeding wound and wants out. So under pressure from Moscow and using some traditional means, the Afghan regime has been pushing its so-called National Reconciliation Program. Party leader Najibullah this week called a Loya Jirga, a grand assembly of loyal tribal and religious leaders to endorse some limited political reforms. But he also declared massive new powers for the president, who happens to be Najibullah. The leader of the Afghan regime has turned into a very difficult ally for the Soviets, headstrong and determined to hold power, yet politically weak and very expensive. A Soviet withdrawal, Najibullah now says, can take place in a 12-month period once the Mujahideen stop fighting and the United States stop supporting them. In fact, Soviet and Afghan troops have come under increasing fire. The rebels have made devastating use of the U.S.-made Stinger missile. Soviet supply planes now drop flares as they approach the capital from a great height, spiraling down for a landing like falling leaves. Helicopters fly interference to deflect the heat-seeking missiles. The Stingers have changed the course of this war. This pilot says his buddy was killed by one of the missiles. Stinger has become a new word for fear in Afghanistan. Soviet helicopter gunships now hug the ground around Kabul instead of attacking rebel positions in the countryside. Soviet bombers fly their missions at less effective high altitudes. On land, the Russians now keep to the roads in huge convoys trying to minimize casualties. But they still must bear the brunt of the fighting, unable to rely on Najibullah's beleaguered Afghan army. If Mikhail Gorbachev wants out, so do his soldiers. They sing about the Black Tulip, the plane that takes the bodies home. In the Black Tulip, the words go, "We have our last mission for the motherland. We're only 20 years old, and our graves are being dug for us." Mark Phillips, CBS News, Kabul.